Hi everybody, it's Kelly Russell from teachersofgod.org, and I'm here to talk to you today about the universal curriculum, the form of the universal curriculum of A Course in Miracles. So we're going to love school today. And I love to think about the Course in Miracles. I love to think about the world in general as a school. And that the Course in Miracles, for those of us who are students of it, the 600-page text is our required reading. The workbook is our 365-lesson study guide. The manual for teachers is a handbook for anyone who wants to be a teacher of God. And our relationships with one another. We are all the teachers and the students, and our relationships with each other in this world are the lab. And so we're having a lab lesson today, and our lab lesson is going to be an exploration of questions about conflict. So it's Relationship 101, and we're exploring conflict. So some of the questions that you all have written into us at teachersofgod.org asking for us to help explain and look at, one of the questions had to do with a person's son who was in and out of psychiatric hospitals and non-compliant with the treatment and the medication, preferring to self-medicate, and the question was, how can I have faith in my son? And another question had to do with a person who had been with a spouse for 10 years and journeyed through a number of different addictions with that person. And how can I not make him the center of my problems? And how can I see beyond this, was the question. And then we had a question about sexual betrayal and how to have healthy boundaries and still be able to look at the relationship with oneness. And we had a question that had to do with a person's daughter and the daughter not seeing the person as the light that she is because she hasn't forgiven herself. And so how to handle and how to hold on when the daughter was acting in an attacking way toward her. And then we had a question about, what do I do when someone acts in a disrespectful way toward me? And how can I continue to see the light in them? And should I say something or should I just be quiet and trust? And so those are all really great questions. And what they have in common, and the reason why we're exploring them all at the same time, is because what they have in common is that they are all examples of our belief in separation. And what happens is that we see another person outside of ourselves, and that's where we see the problem being. And it's because we believe that we have separated from our Creator, our Father, and that we are separate from our brothers, when in truth, we are not. We are all one being, one Son of God. But we harbor this unconscious belief that we have separated, and so that creates a tremendous amount of guilt in us. We feel like we have done the worst thing in the world by separating from our Father. And so what we do is we need to project that unconscious guilt that we feel onto other people, which we now see as separate. And so that's what we do. It's called projection. And so we see problems in other people instead of seeing the problem as being within ourselves, not in a guilty way, but the problem being within ourselves in our own belief. And so we end up seeing it as another person instead. So what do we do about that? Okay. So, our assignment in this exploration is for us to, first of all, go into a place of forgiveness, because we need to be able to heal the belief that we are separate in order to bring ourselves back into a place of oneness and be able to look at the situation differently. So forgiveness in A Course in Miracles is the miracle. Forgiveness causes us to have a shift in perception from fear to love. And that's what we need to have in order to be able to heal that feeling of separation. So the forgiveness process, which I talk about in the blog, there are 4 steps to it. You realize that you've chosen wrongly because your peace is disturbed. You forgive yourself for believing in the illusion, for believing that the other person has done anything wrong, because this is a dream that we're dreaming. And you forgive yourself for dreaming it. You ask Spirit to help you see the situation differently, to help to change your perception, and you give the situation to Spirit, release it to be healed. That brings you to a place where you can then, because of the shift in perception, you can then look at the situation differently. And the next step is reversing the inquiry to the self. So in the situation where there was someone who was seeing her son as being non-compliant and preferring to self-medicate instead of doing what was best for him, her task is to look at herself. Where am I being non-compliant with what is best for me? Where am I preferring to self-medicate rather than look at what is really going on and look at the truth and take responsibility for it? And in the person that was dealing with a spouse who had had several addictions, where am I addicted? And in the person who was being attacked by her daughter, where am I not seeing the light in her or in myself? And where am I attacking myself? So I go into that more in the blog, and I invite you to read the blog and explore it more fully. The last piece of it is asking for guidance. And so a couple of the questions that we had written in were, how do I tell when it's the voice of Spirit versus the voice of ego? And I'll tell you that Spirit is always loving. It is always kind. The answer is always for the best of all concerned. It is never self-righteous. It is never blaming. It is never judgmental. It is never critical. Sometimes the answer is no. And I talk about that in the blog as well, about sometimes we change the form of a relationship, or we say no as to what is happening in the relationship, or whether I want to continue in the form of this relationship. But it is never done with blaming or with saying this is your fault and this is why I'm changing the form. But sometimes that is the answer. We don't make that decision with ourselves. We make the decision by going within, getting quiet, and asking Holy Spirit. And we know it's the right answer because we feel a very strong sense of certainty, a gentleness. It's a universal yes. So thank you so much for being my lab partners today, for being my students as well as my teachers. It is so fun to be in this universal curriculum and in this school of love with you. Namaste. I love you.
Awesome.